Frank, I guess I'm normal in that I would love to be immortal. You claim that there's a way we can be in some far future of the universe. Are you kidding with me?
Not at all, Robert. I think not only is it possible, it's inevitable that every person who is living now and who has ever lived will be resurrected in the far future, never to die again, i.e. the claim made by all the traditional religions.
All right, tell me how it works.
It's pure physics, Robert. What happens is, over time, physics is going to require living things to move out and take control of the universe. One of the things they'll do is counsel the acceleration that the universe is now undergoing. When that happens, the universe will expand to a maximum size and then start to collapse in and on itself. Now, as that occurs, life will be able to gain control of the entire universe and use the power of collapse. Energy will be released in the collapse to increase their power literally without limit as you're going into the final state of the universe, the final singularity. So what's happening is computer power is increasing without limit all over the universe as you're going into the final state. Now, eventually, the computers will become powerful enough that they can emulate, that makes a virtual reality copy, something like the reality in the Matrix, which everyone now is familiar with, a real reality. What the beings in the far future with this gigantic amount of power can do is make a perfect emulation of the entire universe today and make an emulation which everyone who has ever lived will be recreated as a computer emulation. Just like in the Matrix, when you're in that virtual reality, you are unaware of the fact it's just a virtual reality.
Okay, now I'd like to believe this because I would like to live forever, even if it's in your world. And
it's not my world, it will be your world too,
right, well,
because it will be this world emulated all over again.
Okay, well, I'd like to believe that, but let me look at some of these assumptions. The first one that you mentioned, you kind of threw it in there, that human being or whoever would have to control the acceleration of the universe. Did I hear that right?
You certainly did. Have to turn it off.
The universe is now not only expanding but accelerating in its expansion. The data seems very clear on that.
I'm completely convinced myself of the data.
Good. So that we now, you're saying there's going to have to be a mechanism, an interventional mechanism, or a change in the physics of the way things happen?
I think that we can understand how life can turn off the acceleration if we understand how the acceleration started in the first place, what causes it. Now, if you use the basic physical laws, which I think are, for me, it's the Holy Trinity, quantum mechanics, general relativity, and the standard model of particle physics, combining those all into one really tell you what is causing the acceleration. In quantum relativity, there is an intrinsic acceleration force called the cosmological constant. But in the standard model, there's something much like a cosmological constant called the Higgs vacuum. It's just a technical term, but it has the effect by itself of causing the universe to try to contract very, very rapidly. The cosmological constant tends to push it apart. Now, these two right now are fighting. The cosmological constant has just slight advantage. But if the Higgs were to take its correct value, its minimum value, its true minimum value, then they would precisely cancel, the acceleration would turn off. Now, how can that happen? Well, why would we imagine that the Higgs vacuum is not at its true vacuum? I think that the answer lies in the answer to the question, why is there more matter than antimatter? That's an outstanding cosmological question. The standard model once again comes to the rescue and gives us a natural mechanism for creating more matter than antimatter. But when that mechanism acts, it tends to raise the Higgs out of its natural vacuum.
So are you saying that this would be an inevitable process because of the changing constants, or would it have to be an intelligent intervention once you know to somehow change the physics of the universe?
What will happen is life will act automatically in its very act of survival in turning it off. Because to survive, obviously, life needs energy.
So life will have the capacity, the ability
Yes.
to change physical law.
Not change physical law. Physical law is invariant. It, by definition, never changes. What life can do is use physical law in a way we know in principle it can, but we do not yet have the techniques to do so. Why is there more matter than antimatter? The answer is, obviously, some physical law created it. But if a physical law causes more matter than antimatter to be created, if there's some physical law out there, which we know there is,
Yes.
to create matter, then the same physical law can be used to annihilate matter.
Maybe.
I think that in principle we can use these physical laws. But I can give an additional argument that life will use this law because ultimately, for full consistency of physical law, specifically quantum field theory, that's a technical term, but full consistency of quantum field theory requires life to act. Life is here in the universe for a specific purpose, namely to enforce the consistency of physical
You're
law.
giving me a lot. You're throwing a lot at me. So I'm going to try to deal with this one at a time. So now I have life dealing with the expansion of the universe, somehow working with physical law.
By annihilating matter, they are going to force the Higgs back to its natural
However it
vacuum.
works, we're
Yes.
going to now stop the acceleration.
Yes.
We're going to have a contraction. Now,
Yes.
the next thing you said, though, is the contraction was going to increasingly generate information computing power as
The
it gets
contraction provides
energy,
energy.
right? Okay.
That when you think of it this way, everybody's heard of a supernova. They are huge explosions. The supernovas, which are the type 2, basically are a collapsing core of a highly evolved star. Now what happens is that core goes from roughly the size of the Earth to something smaller than the central part of Manhattan in a fraction of a second. That releases huge amounts of gravitational energy, gravitational collapse energy, enough to blast that star apart. In fact, the energy released in gravitational energy in that fraction of a second in which the core of the star collapses is greater than the total power output of that star over its entire lifetime.
Sure.
Vast amounts of energy.
Even that, so you're never going to get an infinite amount of power.
Oh, but the
How do you get
universe,
infinite?
because this star only collapses to a finite size, but the energy is 1 over the radius of the universe, and the radius of the universe is going to 0. So that means the potential energy which life will have available to it is literally infinite as the universe collapses into 0 size.
But at some point you have a universe that's 10 to the minus who knows what number in radius.
As high or small below the Planck length that you wish.
Right.
Yes. So you will need a consistent theory of quantum gravity to describe it. Fortunately, the problem was solved by Richard Feynman 40 years ago, and it gives us that result.
I don't know if Feynman would have agreed with that, but maybe.
I'm sure he would disagree because he did not publish his calculations. I was aware of it because I was a student of relativity at the University of Maryland, and we had an outstanding relativity group there. All outstanding relativity groups have a copy of Feynman's mimeograph notes, and you can see he had the theory, but he did not realize what he had. It's amazing how many great scientists can have the answer and not see it. For example, Nicholas Copernicus. He had, as we all know, a heliocentric system. But if you look in detail at his model, it's very much like this ancient Ptolemaic model. The sun is not the real center of the orbits. It's slightly off to the side. And also, it's not moving in perfect circles around the sun. It's going in little epicycles. Ugly picture. But if you look carefully at the actual orbit that it's generating an ellipse. It's following an ellipse according to what's called, it sweeps out equal areas in equal time. Now, what Copernicus has done, and not realized what he's done, is construct Kepler's 2 laws of planetary motion. Feynman was a great genius, equal in genius to Copernicus. He also missed what he had.